We did a review of what we've been doing, notably with food security in the last years. And it appears that the Commission has been quite efficient in tackling the recent food crisis. One of the most famous ones was the food crisis of 2008, which was provoked by what we were calling at the time high food prices, which turned at a later stage to become an issue of food price volatility, meaning prices going up and down very quickly. In this context, we quickly set up a food facility of €1 billion. Afterward, there was the important L'Aquila Summit, where we commit $3.9 billion, which were mainly in addition of this 1 billion food facility, still to tackle food crisis in the world. And last year, we had to come up with 2 additional initiatives, one for the Horn of Africa, called SHARE, and one for the Sahel, called AGIR. In total, in those 2 regions, we had around 30 million people suffering from a very high degree of vulnerability. So that's really a significant amount of money, and it was worth doing a review of those programs. And what we saw is that the Commission has been pretty good at mobilizing significant financial resources in a short period of time to address the consequences of those crises. We draw this lesson for food security, and it appears that we may draw those lessons for other types of disasters. Where we see that we've been less successful is to work on the need to address the root causes of the crisis, so that at the end of the intervention, not only we have the vulnerable people who have not been suffering from the consequence of the crisis, but they're also better equipped to face the next crisis. And this is really the whole challenge about resilience, since we are convinced that economic shocks are going to keep happening. Climate change is taking place, so we are going to have more climatic extreme events, notably drought and floods, but other may be expected also. We may still fear also earthquakes, which have bigger impact because we have also bigger cities, notably. So we believe that we are going also to have more exposure to disaster, and it's very important that we prevent those shocks to have too heavy consequences on developing countries. A few elements about Agenda for Change. First is that Agenda for Change is still very much poverty focused, or focusing on the most vulnerable part of the world population. And this is what we are looking at. We can see it notably with the concept of differentiation, which has been introduced in Agenda for Change. And we see that the most vulnerable part of the population of the world is located in the countries which are going to receive most of the assistance of the EU in the coming years. That's one aspect. The second aspect, which is very prominent in Agenda for Change, is the importance given to partner countries in their responsibility to design policies and to implement those. Beyond resilience, what is one of the ideas we want to promote is that countries have to develop their own capacities to face shocks and disaster, and that's really in line with priorities of Agenda for Change. Now the third one is more at thematic level. Agenda for Change gives significant attention to agriculture, sustainable agriculture, food security, and also the private sector. In the most vulnerable countries, we see that at the same time agriculture is the most important sector of the economy in most of the cases, but it's also the one which is the most exposed to both the climatic shocks but also the economic shocks. This is what we have seen with the food price crisis of 2008. That's very important. And then what is also important is the attention we give to the private sector, because our conviction is that if we want the countries to be more resilient, partner countries and donors will not be sufficient to address all the needs of the population, investment of the private sector are also very important in this context. Introducing resilience in development cooperation will certainly change the way we are working. It will change the way we are working both at headquarters and in delegation on two aspects, on the programming and also that's on the long term, and when shocks happens on our relation with ECHO, both at country level and at headquarters. So first thing on the long term, what we really want to see in the multi-annual programming for the new MFF, so the period starting in 2014, is that we devote a significant attention to the root causes of vulnerability. Because we see that in our programming we devote often a significant attention to the most urgent needs to tackle the consequences of ongoing food crisis, but really we really want to see more attention being given to the root causes. We know that if we have not been working on those in the past, it is often because they are also more complex or more difficult, more sensitive, but this is really where we want to go, and we want to lean on national policies on that. Now, what we want also to see changing is the relation we have with our colleagues of ECHO, so that whenever a disaster occurs, we have more joint work to identify where are the most vulnerable people, joint work to see how we should intervene to support those, so that at the end of the day, we have really one well-packaged EU support for the most vulnerable part of the world. We've been discussing for many years concepts which are very close to resilience or partially overlapping. We may speak about LRRD, linking relief, rehabilitation and development. We may speak about disaster risk reduction. We may speak about climate change adaptation. We can now speak about resilience to economic shocks. All those aspects have been heavily discussed, and sometimes we have not seen the progress we expect. But we see that in some countries, there has been major progress. For instance, for food security, we have seen major progress in Niger, where the government decided that they have to have the right policies to address food insecurity, but also they have to have the right tools to address the food crisis. And we see that with the crisis which is occurring right now, Niger has developed a good policy and good tools to address with their own means the food crisis of 2012. This is very encouraging, and we may provide other examples of success. So a government to have policies taking on board the root causes of vulnerability is really where they need to put all the effort, and the headquarters is there to support that, and also to support the pressure in the policy dialogue on those aspects. One of the key issues for if we want to promote resilience is really an issue of capacity. And capacity at all levels. I've been speaking a lot about policy development, which is made by national administration and government. But we don't want those to be developed purely by the national administration and government without interfacing with the population. So if we are moving toward resilience, we also need to develop the capacities of the most vulnerable part of the population. This is why in the communication we insist so much at capacities being developed at all levels, from household to communities to countries. We have already quite a good experience in capacity development, and it has to be incorporated in the support we provide in each sector. That's very important.